Well, hello, and welcome to the Pen to Publish podcast from the two Alexas. If you're penning and publishing, or even just planning to pen and publish, you're in the right place. I'm Alexa Whitten, author, typesetter, and independent publisher, and
I'm Alexa Tewksbury, author, editor, and proofreader. You can never have too many Alexas. We love getting feedback, so do please review and subscribe. And we also have a group full of like-minded writers, which you can join over on Facebook and get your writing results happening. It's called the Writers Refinery, and the link will be in the show notes that accompany these podcasts. So let's get started.
Well, hello. And today it's episode 4, series 4 of the Pen to Publish podcast. And today we're going to be talking all about books and blogs on writing and our recommendations. Now, I'm going to hold my hands up because some of these books that I'm recommending I haven't actually read myself. However, a couple of them are on my to buy list, or I've already got them and I'm going to read them at some stage. But sometimes when you're in the business, it's really hard to then take time and work on the business. And I know Alexa, one, reads for a living, although she wouldn't ever call it reading. So unfortunately, talking to people who produce, write and typeset books, we tend not to then read an awful lot of business books on how to do our craft because we're in it. But anyway, we thought we couldn't have an episode without some recommendations. So take a listen, go and take a look at them. And there are definitely a couple that I think you should always have in your library. So I'll make sure that you know what those are. So Alexa 1, do you want to start off with your recommendations?
Okay. Well, these ones, I have read them and they're all brilliant. One of my editor colleagues is a lady who I've mentioned last week, and I know I've mentioned her before, but honestly, in my view, you can't talk properly about resources for writers and editors without mentioning Louise Harnby. Now, Louise also co-hosts a podcast, the Editing Podcast, which is full of tips and information for editors as well as writers. She's an author too, and the most prolific producer of writing tips and resources for authors. So there'll be lots of links in the show notes this week. There'll be links to where you can buy books and find out their publication information. This link to her website will also be in the show notes. And on her website, she provides this incredible resource library. It's a treasure trove to help authors, perhaps new authors especially, just to understand things like point of view in writing, show versus tell, how to write great dialogue, how to pare your writing down, how to create mood and rhythm within your text. Now, all those things that are invaluable to getting your writing right. Often first-time writers will get something wrong because they've not had it explained or they've just not grasped the concept of it. But it's getting those technical writing details correct that makes such a difference to the overall standard of your writing. So Louise Harnby's, I'm saying the name again, Louise Harnby's resource library is an absolutely brilliant place for fiction authors to go to brush up on things or to learn something new about writing. And although she does do paid for courses, these resources for authors, they're free. You can just go and help yourself to what you want. Now, Louise has also written a book called Editing Fiction at Sentence Level, A Guide for Beginner and Developing Writers. Now, inside it says this book is a book for writers who want to improve their sentence level craft. And yes, it's helpful for fiction editors too, but mainly it's a guide for authors to help them carry out an initial self-edit before moving on to the professional editing stage. So it would help with the second or the third draft of your novel. Everything Louise has written about in her book is relevant to fiction authors before they write their book and as they're writing it. It's basically a how-to that gives guidelines on how to get your writing right, not in terms of plotting, but in terms of how to write the story that's in your head once you've pinned the plot down. So sentence by sentence. As an editor, I work mainly on authors writing at sentence level. So I go through it minutely, literally working on it sentence by sentence. And that's the level authors need to be working at too in their self-edit. Every sentence matters, the structure, the grammar, the pace, the flow. And if you are an author, Louise's book will really help you understand what to look out for as you're writing and as you're self-editing and reworking through the various drafts to get your book ready for a professional edit. And it's packed with examples too from well-known authors, so you can see exactly what she's talking about in action. Now, another book for fiction authors, this is a different in style from Louise Harnby's book, but again, it's so full of invaluable teaching about writing, is The Art of Writing Fiction by Andrew Cowan, who is a prize-winning novelist himself. I actually came across this book a few years ago because it was one of my daughter's set texts for her degree. She did creative writing at the University of East Anglia, where Andrew Cowan was, and I'm still is, course director for the MA in creative writing. So he really knows what he's talking about. The book has chapters on writing about what you know, so perhaps keeping journals to kickstart your ideas, for example, writing about what you don't know. He talks about free writing, which perhaps that's something we could talk about at some point in here. It's just kind of letting your writing go off in all sorts of directions and not putting any blocks on it as writing exercises.
There's actually, just sorry to jump in because I don't think I've included this in my list. There's another really good book called The Artist's Way. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Oh, I haven't.
And in it, the author, so it's a course in discovering and recovering your creative self, and it's called The Artist's Way, and it's by Julia Cameron, and she talks about free pages, which is basically you wake up in the morning and you just write 4 pages in the morning, no structure, you just write whatever, kind of what you've just talked about, free writing.
Yeah.
If you do it on a regular basis, it just unlocks your creativity because you're not editing as you go. You're just literally letting your mind write whatever it wants to. And it may sound a little bit daunting to begin with, but she said if you get into the habit of it, you'll find once you turn on the tap of creativity, writing out morning pages really can help. So The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, I'm going to add that to the show notes as well. I mean, I don't talk about this in my recommendations, but I think it's definitely worth a mention.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm
Alexa.
going to get that one. No. That reminding me what you're saying there, though, about it unlocking your creativity. Again, I do mention the same people, but Sophie Hannah, the crime and thriller writer, she says that she feels that her brain has been trained to come up with twists and all sorts of the weirdnesses that goes on in her book, because that's what she does. That's what her brain is used to doing. And so it's kind of got into this groove of it can find those things when she needs it to. So I can well see how free writing, just making yourself write, can unlock something. And it's all about, I suppose it's all about like exercising it like a muscle, isn't it?
Absolutely.
To do the things that you want it to do.
Absolutely.
But anyway, back to Andrew Cowan's book, The Art of Writing Fiction. So that was writing about what you don't know. He talks about characters. He talks about voices, the different voices that you can have in your book. So conversation, formatting, dialogue, viewpoints, then story structure, subplotting, going back and revising your work, and generally developing a distinctive style, which I think is really important given how competitive it is in the book writing world. If you can read something that will help you develop a distinctive style with which to tell your story, that's going to be so useful. And again, there are examples to help you really grasp what the author is talking about. So it's another really practical how-to book like Louise Harnby's, but this one also goes into getting your initial ideas for your story. So it takes you a step further back in the book writing process to before you have anything planned or plotted, and then it goes into the more technical aspects of writing after that. And then this book I have dipped into, but I haven't read it from cover to cover, but it looks so useful from the bits that I've seen. If you want to write for children, I would really recommend Writing Children's Fiction, A Writer's and Artist's Companion by Linda Newbury. This book very helpfully starts from the correct premise that writing for children is hard, because children are a really difficult readership. It's hard to engage them and it's hard to keep them. So writing for children isn't an easy option, and it's important to understand that before you go into it. Now, in part 1 of this book, the author explores the challenges of writing for children and looks at the variety of children's literature that there is out there. There is so many different styles and genres covering all the age ranges from beginner readers to YA fiction. So that will help you to know the age group that you want to write for, perhaps the genre that you want to write in, the kind of subject matter you want to be writing about. And then in part 2, there's a real wealth of tips from wonderful, well-known children's and YA authors. So David Almond is in there, whose books I love, Mallory Blackman, Meg Rossoff, and Mike Morpurgo, whose books I do love, but some of them are so sad, they're really. And how better to learn the tips and tricks than from those who've succeeded so brilliantly before you? I would want to learn from people like that. So this book has a fantastic compilation of those tips in it. And then part 3 delves into, again, the practicalities of writing. So knowing your target audience, which we talk a lot about in this podcast, building plots, creating characters. It also gives some fantastic insights into finding an agent and a publisher when you're ready, if you don't want to go the self-publishing route. So all in all, a really fantastic book for would-be children's authors. I think it's worth mentioning as well that the Writers and Artists Bible, the Writers and Artists Yearbook, that lists all the up-to-date contact and submission guideline information for publishers and agents and magazines. Also, every new annual edition, it contains some really useful articles for writers written by authors and agents and publishers. So again, written by people in the industry. So it's well worth getting your hands on a copy if you can, even if you're just wanting to find out about writing. It's got lots and lots of listings. So if you want to contact anybody, the listings are there with addresses and email addresses and names and things. But the articles are so useful as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard some feedback that the contact details aren't necessarily accurate. I mean, I don't know where they get their information from, but yes, I think it's definitely something that would be worth having on your shelf. I've never bought one myself, but I do hear it a lot being discussed by writers and people who are wanting to get published, is to get the Writers and Artists Bible. Now, my book list isn't as extensive as Alexa One's, and surprisingly, there aren't that many books out there for writing non-fiction, which I thought was quite interesting. However, there is one more book on writing fiction that must be included, and that's Stephen King's book on writing.
Oh, yes.
Now, this is, whenever I ask the question, what book do you recommend for writers? This book always comes up as an answer. I actually haven't read it myself, but I'm definitely going to get it, I think, because it's been mentioned so many times. I really feel like, as someone who's in the publishing industry, I really should read this book. He is a prolific writer. He writes many, many hundreds of books. I don't know if you're a Stephen King fan. He's made millions, I think, from his books. They're films, they're TV shows. So it is a very, very popular book, and one I would definitely recommend you get. This is briefly what it's about. So it's a part memoir, part masterclass by one of the best-selling authors of all time. And this, it's a superb volume, is revealing a practical view on the writer's craft, complete with basic tools of the trade every writer must have. And I'm definitely going to get myself a copy. Now, in terms of non-fiction book, here are my selections. Now, again, this book has been I think it's been in my Amazon basket for the last 2 years. I don't know why I just haven't bought it. But it's Elements of Style by William Strunk and E.B. White. Now, this has been written for an American audience, but it is a comprehensive book for all things written. I'll read you out a bit of the blurb. So William Strunk was a professor of English at Cornell University and the author of The Elements of Style back in 1918. We're talking a long time ago. After a revision and an enlargement by his former student, E.B. White, it's become a highly influential guide to English usage during the late 20th century. So it is just, you do have to bear in mind when it was written, but I do think Elements of Style never go out of fashion. And he looks at minute detail, so punctuation, grammar, how you need to really write a sentence from a structural point of view. And also it's a quick, handy reference guide, as I said, for good grammar, style, and layout as well. Despite being a relatively old book, the rules in it are timeless, which is true. And the writing style of the book is uncluttered and easy to follow. That's just a review that I've got off Amazon. However, I will just warn you, if you're a fan of the Oxford comma, all good. If you're not a fan of the Oxford comma, then I don't know. As I said, don't forget this has been written for an American audience. And of course, American writers have their own rules where it comes to things. So you might not necessarily take this book literally word for word, and I can definitely use the word literally here. So use your common sense, but I do definitely think it's a classic book that any writer should definitely have in their library. The next book, again, I haven't read it, It looks really interesting, and it's called How to Write Nonfiction by Joanna Penn. Interesting name. I wonder if that's her actual name, Joanna Penn.
Penn.
Mm.
I've come across Joanna Penn. I think she has a blog as well, and I can't think of the name of it, but I've definitely come across Joanna Penn, though. That's interesting that you found her book. Yes.
Yeah. And this book covers all the aspects you need if you're going to write a nonfiction book, from mindset, how to get in the right mindset, obviously, to how to gather all the info you need to write as well. The content looks extensive. I've taken a look on Amazon. It looks good. Again, I probably should buy it just because there aren't that many books out there for nonfiction writers. It's really interesting.
It's surprising, isn't it? That is surprising.
There are lots of business books on how to make your business stand out and how to run your business, but actually how to write a business book. So this brings me nicely onto, obviously, my book. My book has been written, and it's called, as you probably know by now, Publish Your Way to More Clients. And I talk exactly about how to write a business book. And I don't go into any specifics of what business you need to be in. I take the overall arching, like if you decide that you're a business owner and you want to write a book, showing off your expertise, which is exactly what you should be doing, and use it as a lead generator, then I tell you how, step by step, what to do, how to get into the right mindset, what you need to know before you start, and then how you actually start and write the book itself. So if you want a comprehensive guide on how to write a nonfiction book, business book, then my book, if you haven't already got it, please do go grab it. It is on Amazon as a Kindle and as a regular printed book as well. So really, those are all of ours. And we mustn't forget, Alexa, before we started recording this episode, I actually also have another book called The Illustrator's Guide to Writing a Children's Book. And when I first wrote this book, which is available on Amazon now, it was basically if you'd already written it. So you want to go on to the next step. But what I've realized is people want some more information on how to write the book. They want to know how before they begin. So I'm expanding this book. I'm doing an edition 2, and I've had a chat with Alexa, and she's going to do a guest chapter about how to write rhyming. Yes, you're going to do a chapter about how to write.
About rhyming picture books and whether your picture book needs to be rhyming, and just writing a picture book in prose, because I was approached by an author a while ago who'd written a book in rhyme, but the rhyme didn't work particularly well, and for the subject matter there was no need for it to be rhyming. So I suggested she go away and just write it as a straightforward prose book. It was sort of fiction rather, but it was giving information as well, but it didn't need to rhyme. So I will talk about rhyming versus non-rhyming and how to go about writing your picture book, where to get your ideas, the wealth of ideas for picture books, because they can be about anything, really.
Yeah. So although obviously we're recording this, well, we might as well confess we're recording this in May. This episode won't come out till September. So this book will be available to buy by the time you're listening to this.
So get that chapter in.
So we're committing. You will put the notes in the show notes where you can get this revised edition. It'll be available on Amazon, or if you just contact one of us, we'll be able to get you a copy. It's not a problem. So yes, those really are the must-have books that you need to get. We've got an extensive list there. I think we've covered every type of writing you need help with.
Is it the practicalities, the technicalities of writing? It's so important to understand those and get them right. It just makes such a difference to your book. Yeah. So it's well worth exploring those aspects in these books.
And also, I can't express enough, we were talking about this earlier as well before we hit record, writing is like a muscle. You need to do it, and you need to do it regularly if you're going to get any good at it. And Stephen King, one of his biggest tips that he gives in his book is read. Understand, but actually getting into the mindset of how you like a piece to be written. you can then get an idea of how they're physically writing their work. You can then get an idea of the sentence structure. So I would always say, regardless, you can read all you like, but unless you practice and unless you actually do, you're not going to get good at it.
And the reading one, anyway, is just a good excuse. Well, I'm
exactly.
sorry, I have to go and read now because it's helping my writing.
Yes, exactly. And I think Kylie, I know we mentioned Kylie Dixon a lot on our episodes, but I think she did exactly that when, before she wrote any of her Inkcap books, she went and read the right genre and the right age group, and she saw how the books were set out, and she saw what they look like, and she saw what kids are reading. And I think that's exactly what you need to do. Go and read and read and read and do your research. I mean, I think we talk about that all the time. People are getting sick of us saying, but it's true. So anyway, that's all of our recommendations. We've also given you some tips as well on what to do once you get those books. So read. All of the details for all of these are going to be in the show notes. And next week, what are we talking about next week, Alexa?
Next week, we've been asking authors for questions that they have about writing, about publishing. So we'll be having a kind of a Q&A. They won't be appearing, the authors won't be appearing, but we'll compile their questions and we'll hopefully give them some really interesting answers.
Yes. Some of the questions we've got are ones that come up time and time again. And to us, they're really obvious, but obviously because they keep getting asked, they'll be not obvious. So we'll be going through those as well. And I think that'll be really give you a full explanation so that you're not asking these same questions if you come and ever use us or decide to write a book of your own. So that's it from us. Nice to have been here talking to you as usual, and have a fantastic rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.